how can I become a more spiritual person? Or how can I find my purpose? And they start with the way that they learn anything. Problem-solving logic. A plus B plus C plus D equals whatever it is, and you just go through the steps. It's not like that. When you consider that everything that you have done in your life has led you up until this moment that you have right now, and all of the things that you have assessed to be negative, all of the addictions perhaps that you've had, all of the problems you've had in your marriages, all the problems you've had with your children, all of the weight problems perhaps that you've had, all of the difficulties that have come your way, the financial concerns and the bankruptcies and all of the stuff that if you were to reach into your bag, you could pull out this whole bag full of negative stuff. You get to a point that the Buddhists call satori, S-A-T-O-R-I. Satori. It means instant enlightenment. Instant enlightenment. And the Buddhists believe, by and large, that enlightenment is something that happens in instants. It happens in moments. It's like, I've talked about it some of my other tapes, about going through the gate. It's like on one side of the gate is the path that is strewn with thorns, all right? And there's all of the stuff that I have just described. And then there's this gate ahead of you. And on the other side of the gate is this garden. And there's this flowers, and it's just magnificent, and there's happiness, and there's bliss, and there's fulfillment, and there's all of this wonderful stuff on the other side. But you can't get through the gate. And then comes the moment in your life when you go through the gate. You just go through. The thorns that were there don't matter anymore. The obstacles are no longer obstacles. It's just and it's like, boom, instantaneously, you are now on a different path altogether. I can tell you that for those of you who are struggling and trying to find a formula and trying to get it all into A, B, C, D, E, F, it isn't that way. First of all of the thorns and all of the obstacles that have been created in your life are there for a reason, even though that's a hard thing for us to accept. There's something to be learned from each one of those. And so instead of saying, how can I avoid these in the future, you reprocess your life in a different way and say, I created this for what reason? And I'm going through this because, and then you fill in the blanks, or the lesson in this for me is, all right, instead of why is this happening to me and isn't this awful and so on. And then satori happens. And I mean, that was very revealing for me to read about this instant enlightenment, because every major change that I've made in my life, I mean, they don't seem like major, big changes, but the changes that I've made happened in instants. I mean, just in seconds. Now, in the physical world of changes that I have made, I can remember when I first decided that I was going to start running and exercising and get myself in shape instead of being overweight and out of shape like I had been. In an instant. And it was a doctor at a hospital where I wasn't a patient. I was working there. I was training the staff in group therapy at North Shore Hospital on Long Island. And this doctor said one thing to me. He said, if you continue on the path that you're on, you're going to be a candidate for a heart attack in 5 years. He wasn't trying to be helpful to me. He wasn't anything. He just was making a statement. And that evening, I went out and I ran for the first time as an adult. And it's now almost 15 years later, and I haven't missed a day of running in 15 years. It was just like an instant kind of thing, and then it was like carrying through on that. And I mean, that really flies in the face of a lot of the stuff that we hear all the time about you have to have a goal, and you have to have a plan, and you have to get it all figured out, and you have to work step by step by step. I really think that enlightenment, or discovering this inner source of strength, is something that just happens in an instant whenever you're ready. So whoever you are, I mean, if you're smoking, if you're drinking excessively, if you've got addictive habits in your eating habits and so on, if you are behaving in ways with your children or with your wife or co-workers or whatever, and you think that it's just hopeless and that you can't change and that it's just too difficult to process and so on, I'm really saying to you that in an instant you can decide to radically alter your life. And it isn't like even a decision-making process. You're now ready. The same Buddhists say that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And whatever it is that you will need to be able to accomplish what it is that you're here for, what your purpose is, what you're about, is going to be instantaneously and readily and easily available to you the minute that you allow yourself to go through that gate. It's just there for you, and it's so easy. Now, the same thing is true of this business about going within and visualizing and picturing what it is that you want for yourself and so on. I mean, 15 years ago, I would have laughed at that idea of meditating on an airplane, before visualizing something on an airplane before I was going to do it or anything like that. I didn't have the readiness level then, and apparently I had an awful lot of lessons to learn before I got to the point where I am today, where I know that I'm not alone. And you only discover that when you're ready to discover it. And once you have the readiness, you'll see changes taking place. A lot of those changes I outlined in the tape series that we call Transformation. You'll see it when you believe it, what the steps are and what the signs are of your transformation in your life. And once you start seeing those, you'll start seeing yourself behaving and doing things in a different way than you did before, and reacting and processing and all of that in a different way. Then it's like you walk through and you start seeing these sensational changes take place, and it's almost as if you're outside of yourself watching them take place. And it's like your body becomes this actor, just this sort of vehicle. And in your mind, where you do all of your living, you're going through just unprecedented gates. Now, most people don't experience this or don't use this untapped, phenomenal universe that is within them because they're not at the gate yet. I mean, it isn't anything to be upset about. It isn't anything to be berating yourself for. It's almost like you have to become kinder and gentler with yourself where you are right now and accept even that. And as you do less of the judgmental stuff towards yourself, you can almost see down the road or see into the future. As you're using your mind in new ways, you're creating a whole new universe within. And that whole new universe within is just the precursor to the universe of your physical world. And if you're not doing that, I recommend that you discover that inner secret and go within, and I can, perhaps give some specifics on how to do that. But don't discount the whole powerful notion of satori, of instant awakening. For those who have real logical sort of left brain minds, the dilemma is always, if I'm acting out a script, and the script has already been written and there's an intelligence about this and that everything happens for a reason, then I must not have a free will, and therefore I'll just sort of sit back and sit in a cave and allow the world to transpire and allow my life to take place, and I'm really not in charge of it. That's the great dilemma that a lot of people face until they get to the point where they realize that both things are operating at the same time. And you have to live with that duality or that polarity of being in charge and not being in charge, of being doomed to make choices. You learn to live with that paradox. It's the reason for the smirk on the face of the Buddha. When you get used to it and live with it, it becomes almost delicious and exciting to know that you are at the same moment acting out a much grander scheme. And at the very same moment, you're making all the choices within it all at the same time. And you can fight with that one forever and not get any place with it. What I suggest is that you know that every step along the way that you're making along the path, all the obstacles, all the things that you're going through at this moment, that what you do is you start to process them a little bit differently. And process them not in terms of why do I have to do this and why isn't my life working out or why are things so negative and so on, but process it a little differently in that, why am I choosing this? Why am I participating in this now? What do I have to get out of this? What is the lesson in it for me? And as you do that, you find yourself moving more and more towards the gate. And then when you come up to the gate, you just sort of slam it shut behind you and you never look back again. And that's when you know that you're not alone. That's when you know that for whatever help that you are looking for or whatever guidance you're seeking or whatever road you want to travel, that there's another world other than the world of the five senses. that the five sensory beings, if you will, are the ones who just only believe in what they see and believe that the senses are the limitations of their universe. And those are the same people who, before the invention of the microscope, would have laughed and scoffed at the existence of microscopic life. And then there's the multisensory beings, or the beings who believe in things that are invisible, like myself, who don't need to have a measuring device to know that it exists, because you can't measure your thoughts, and you can't measure spirit, and you can't measure consciousness, and you can't measure soul. These are just sort of abstractions. But we all know that we think and that we have thoughts. The multisensory person is someone who absolutely and completely knows that there's guidance and help there, whereas the five sensory being says, no, the limits of your help are just exactly what you can do with your hands and with your eyes and with your ears and so on. And I happen to be one of those multisensory beings who doesn't need a measuring device, even though I believe one will be forthcoming in years to come, to prove the existence of the soul, or to prove the existence of divine intervention or divineness as a part of your humanity. I know it, it works for me, I go there all the time. Those people who don't ever experience that in their life are just not experiencing it because they choose to only restrict themselves to whatever they can experience with their five senses. Anything else just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, there are people who seem to be cursed with an awful lot of bad luck, what we call bad luck, whose relationships don't work, who have financial problems, who perhaps are restricted in wheelchairs or physically in some way incapacitated. And tragedy seems to be on every doorstep of their life. And yet it's amazing that when you meet people who have had these kinds of conditions, how some people who've gone through those horrible conditions will curse it and be angry with it, and so their life, where they do all of their living, which is again is in the mind, is filled with despair. And there are others, I mean, you just have to watch the Jerry Lewis telethon to see young people who've been racked with muscular dystrophy come up on stage and be the most positive and joyful and beautiful people. And you wonder, how can somebody who is trapped in such a prison of a body that doesn't work in any level have such a magnificent attitude in their life, when you would think that they would have every reason in the world to be negative? It always depends upon what that inner soul is like. If you're going through tragedy after tragedy and difficulty after difficulty, and those things continue to multiply, you might just start asking yourself, am I playing any role in this? No blame, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's like, what's in this for me? And why am I going through this life this way? And you begin to see that as you change inwardly and begin to realize that you're part of the perfection of it all, and that God is with you regardless of what the physical world for you is like, and that this isn't your humanity, that you're not a human being having a spiritual experience. You're a spiritual being having a human experience, and that human experience that you're having right now is a part of what you're here for, what you sort of signed up for. And if you can get past the poor me, this shouldn't be happening, isn't this awful mentality of all of that, you can transcend it. And if you can't, you know, it's really like, which comes first? It's a chicken and the egg kind of question that we're discussing here. Is the negativity in my life the result of my thinking, or is my thinking creating this negativity in my life? You have to always ask yourself over and over again. It's like, no matter how terrible the circumstances of your life, is being upset, miserable, full of despair, anger, hatred, and all of that kind of negativity, is that going to do anything to correct that? And even the person who seems to be in the worst of circumstances, who doesn't have the attitude of this shouldn't be happening to me, but instead is saying it is and what's in it for me, you'll find that that person will not be living inwardly in that divine inner universe that is who you are, in agony and despair. That isn't what their life is about. Externally, it may look that way. Externally, there may not be enough food on the table. Externally, they may be being beaten up by somebody. And externally, they may be in bankruptcy and all of that. But inwardly, where you do all of your living that isn't how they process it. You know, it's like that's the kingdom of heaven. It's within. You've got to look at almost the duality of what it means to be human to understand this. One of the things it means to be human is to be in a physical body and all of the physical things that happen to us. And so many of the programs that are put out and the emphasis is on how to make that physical body more attractive and how to keep it young and how to keep it rich and how to keep it insured and how to make a lot of money for it. And that's one big focus, all right? And certainly there's nothing wrong with any of that. But then there's another major part of being human. That is the inner universe, the universe within you. And in that inner universe, the outcomes and the goals and the processes are completely the opposite. They're very, very different. You can't smell inner awareness. You can't touch it. You can't feel it. You can't get a hold of it. You can't dissect it. You can't put it into a measuring device. It is yours to have as a divine package, or it's yours to have as a corrupt and awful package. It just depends on how you use that inner world.